Nah, my wife Ruth died on a Tuesday. I remember because the garbage truck came that morning, the same as always, grinding and clanking down Maple Crest Drive like the world had not just ended inside our house. I stood at the kitchen window watching it go, holding a cup of coffee I never drank, thinking that was the most Ruth thing imaginable, for the world to just keep moving without asking anyone's permission. She had been gone for 11 days when my son-in-law Marcus called the family meeting. He did not call it that, of course. He said it was a financial planning session. He said he wanted to make sure I was protected going forward. He used the word transition 4 times in a 2-minute phone call. I counted. I had nothing else to do. My daughter Claire sat beside him at my own dining room table. The table I built with my hands from a walnut tree that fell in the backfield 31 years ago, and she looked at the wood grain the entire time. She did not look at me. She had not looked at me directly since the funeral, when she stood at Ruth's casket and cried in a way that seemed, I'm ashamed to say, practiced. I noticed it and hated myself for noticing. There was paperwork on the table. Marcus had brought a folder, the kind with the little metal clip at the top. He wore a tie, to my house, on a Wednesday afternoon, to talk to his 64-year-old father-in-law who still had funeral flowers dying in the hallway. I want to help you understand, he said, folding his hands on the table like a man closing a deal. The farm is a liability now, Frank. You cannot run 400 acres alone. The equipment alone costs more to maintain than it earns. Claire and I have been talking to an agricultural investment group out of Nashville, and they are prepared to make a very fair offer. I looked at my daughter. She was still studying the walnut grain. Claire, I said, is this what you want? She lifted her eyes for just a second. Just a flicker. Daddy, she said, we just want what is best for you. Best for me. I had heard Ruth say those words 1,000 times. When she said them, they meant something. Coming from Claire's mouth, sitting next to Marcus with his metal clip folder, they felt like a trapdoor opening under my feet. I reached across the table and turned the folder around. The offer was there on the first page. 412 acres, the farmhouse, the equipment barn, the grain storage, all of it. The number at the bottom had a lot of zeros. For someone else, it might have looked generous. For me, it looked like a price tag on my life. I do not need to decide anything today, I said. Marcus smiled. The smile did not change his eyes. Frank, he said, the offer has a 30-day window. And honestly, the longer you wait, the more the market. I stood up. I am going to feed the horses, I said. I walked out the back door. I did not shuffle. I did not slam anything. I just walked, because there is no dignified response to being sold while you are still breathing. The barn was the one place on the property that still smelled exactly like it always had, hay and leather and something underneath that I could never name. Ruth used to say it smelled like Saturday. She was right. I stood in the center aisle between the stalls and pressed my forehead against the neck of my old quarter-horse Decker. And I did not cry. I had not cried since the hospital. The grief was there, it was always there. But it had gone somewhere deep and quiet, the way a river goes underground in dry country. You know it is still running. You just cannot see it. I stood there a long time. Then I went back inside and told Marcus and Claire that I would think about it. What I did not tell them was that I had already started thinking. Just not about what they wanted me to think about. The next morning I woke up at 5. The same as always. Habit is a kind of armor. I made coffee, put on my boots, walked the east fence line the same way I had walked it for 38 years. The creek was running low. The soybean field on the north end needed attention. The red barn roof had a patch of rust near the ridge that I had been meaning to get to since spring. 412 acres of things I had been meaning to get to. I went back to the kitchen and pulled out the tin box I kept on the top shelf of the pantry behind the extra canning jars. Ruth knew about the tin box. She had put half of what was in it there herself. Inside was the original deed to the property, the trust documents we had drawn up 12 years ago with our attorney Raymond Briggs, insurance papers, and a small notebook where I had kept records. Not financial records, just observations, dates, things that did not add up, a running tally of small wrongnesses that had been accumulating for about 3 years. I am not a suspicious man by nature. I spent 30 years trusting people based on a handshake. But farming teaches you to watch. You watch the sky. You watch the soil. You watch the way water moves after rain. You learn to notice when something is not behaving the way it should, and Marcus had not been behaving the way he should for a long time. It started with the equipment lease. 2 years ago, Marcus convinced me to let him handle the financing on 2 new combines. Said he had a contact at an ag lending firm that could get better terms than my bank in town. I was busy. Ruth had just started her second round of treatment. I signed what he put in front of me. The payments came out on time, so I stopped thinking about it. Then last fall, I got a call from my grain elevator. The man I had sold to for 20 years, saying my account had been flagged for a disputed transaction. $7,000, a deduction for a service contract I had never agreed to. When I asked Marcus about it, he said it was a clerical error and that he had handled it. I checked my statement the next month. The $7,000 was still gone. Marcus said the refund was processing. Ruth was in the hospital that week. I let it go. I did not let it go. I put it in the notebook. I called Raymond Briggs that morning after walking the fence line. He picked up on the second ring because Raymond had been picking up on the second ring for 30 years. He was 71 and still came to the office every day, which was one of the things I loved about him. Raymond, I said, I need to show you something, not over the phone. He told me to come in at 2. I drove the truck into town. It is a 40-minute drive and I did not turn on the radio. I just looked at the land on both sides of the road. Other people's fields, other people's grain bins, other people's long driveways, and I thought about how much of a place you can love without ever being able to explain why. This was my county. My father farmed 15 miles east of here. His father before that. Ruth grew up 20 minutes south. We met at a livestock auction when I was 22 and she was 20, and she told me my boots were ugly, and I told her she was right. Raymond's office was in a 2-story brick building on the courthouse square that smelled like old coffee and manila folders. He was behind his desk when I came in, same as always. He stood up and shook my hand and did not say he was sorry about Ruth, which I appreciated. He had already said it at the funeral, and Raymond was not a man who repeated himself. I put the notebook on his desk. I put the trust documents next to it. Then I told him about the equipment lease, the grain elevator dispute, the Nashville investment group, and the metal clip folder. Raymond listened without interrupting. That was the other thing I loved about him. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. He picked up the trust document and turned to the 3rd page. He read something. Then he looked at me over his glasses. Frank, he said, did Marcus ever ask you to change the distribution clause? About 8 months ago, I said. He said it was a tax thing. Did you sign anything? I thought about it. There had been a dinner at Claire's house, a Sunday, late summer. Marcus had brought out papers after dessert. I remembered thinking it was strange timing. Ruth had stayed home that day, said she was tired. I might have, I said. I do not remember exactly what it was. Raymond set down the trust document. His face did not change expression, but I had known him long enough to read the stillness. He was concerned. I want you to do something for me, he said. Do not sign anything else. Not a single thing. And do not tell Marcus we spoke. On the drive home, I stopped at the gas station on Route 9 and bought a prepaid phone with cash. I am 64 years old, and I had never owned a prepaid phone in my life. The teenager behind the counter showed me how to set it up without looking at me once, which suited me fine. That night I sat on the porch in the dark. There was a warm front moving through and the air smelled like rain coming. Decker was moving around in the paddock. I could hear the creek from where I sat, which meant it was running a little higher than I thought. I talked to Ruth sometimes when no one was around. I know how that sounds. I do not think she answered me. I do not need to believe that to still do it. I told her about the folder. I told her about Raymond's face when he read the trust. I told her I was angry, but that the anger was keeping me from being scared, which was useful. I told her I missed her so much, it was like missing a whole season. Then I went inside and started making a list. The next 2 weeks were the strangest of my life, and I have lived through a drought that lasted 3 years, a barn fire, and a tractor rollover that should have killed me. Marcus came by twice. Each time I played the part. I had not planned to play a part. It came naturally, the way a field goes dormant in winter. You do not look dead, you just conserve. I moved a little slower. I asked him to repeat things. I called him by the wrong name once, accidentally on purpose. He and Claire exchanged a look over my head that I was supposed to miss. I did not miss it. I filed it. Raymond had been busy. He called me on the prepaid phone on a Thursday evening. His voice was careful, the way careful voices get when the news is worse than expected. "Frank," he said, "I pulled the equipment lease." Marcus did not use an ag lending firm. He used a private credit arrangement backed against the farm's operating account. The terms are usurious, and the combine payments have been running 2 months behind for the past year, being covered by transfers from your grain reserve account. Transfers that were authorized with your signature. I gripped the porch railing. "The signatures," I said. "Were they—" "I cannot prove it yet," he said. "But the timestamps on 2 of them correspond to dates in Ruth's medical records when you were at the hospital in Memphis." Memphis. I had spent 11 days in Memphis in March. Ruth had a procedure. I had not left the hospital floor except to get food from the vending machine down the hall. "There is more," Raymond said. "The investment group in Nashville. I made some calls. They're real, but they are a secondary buyer. Someone approached them first, brought them the listing. That someone was Marcus 6 months ago, before Ruth passed." I sat down on the porch steps. The night air came in around me, warm and still. "He listed the farm before Ruth died," I said. "Yes," Raymond said. "He expected this to move faster. I want you to understand something about what I felt in that moment. It was not rage. Rage is loud. What I felt was quieter than that. It was the particular cold of realizing that someone sat at your table, ate your food, called you dad, and was already measuring the rooms. "My daughter," I said. "Does she know?" Raymond was quiet for a beat too long. "I do not know yet," he said. That was the hardest part. That beat of silence. I thought about Claire at 5 years old, following me down the beam rows, serious as a judge, picking up every earthworm she found and moving it to what she decided was a safer location. I thought about teaching her to drive the old farm all tractor, her hands too small for the steering wheel, her jaw set with concentration. I thought about the day she married Marcus. Outdoor ceremony, late September, the light going gold over the east field, and how I had shaken his hand and looked him in the eye and thought, "All right, I can trust this man with my daughter. All right, I can trust this man with my daughter." "All right," I said to Raymond. "What do we need?" He told me. It was a list. It would take time. He had already called a forensic accountant he trusted. He had already pulled every recorded document from the county clerk's office going back 3 years. He needed one more thing from me. He needed proof that Marcus had access to my signatures on the dates in question, something that put him at the documents. I knew where to get it. Marcus used a laptop when he came to the farm. He always set it up on the kitchen table like he owned the place, which in his mind, I suppose he was working toward. 14 months ago, he had asked me to install a wireless printer in the farmhouse so he could handle paperwork faster. I had done it. I barely used it myself, but the printer had a log. Every device that connected to it, every document it processed, every timestamp. I had never thought about it until now. I called the young man who had helped me set up the network when I switched internet providers. His name was Daniel, 26 years old, the grandson of a man I used to buy seed corn from. He came out on a Saturday morning driving a truck that needed a muffler and carrying a laptop bag held together with duct tape. I had worked with his grandfather for 20 years, and the boy had the same steadiness, the same way of listening with his whole face. I told him what I needed. I told him why. I did not embellish. He looked at me for a moment when I finished. Then he said, "Mr. Calloway, that printer is going to tell you everything." He was right. The log showed Marcus's laptop connecting to my printer network on 3 separate occasions in the past 18 months. Each connection had a timestamp. Each timestamp matched within a narrow window one of the fraudulent transfer documents Raymond had flagged. Daniel copied everything to a drive the size of my thumb. He handed it to me and would not take the money I tried to give him. "Let me know if you need anything else," he said. "My grandfather always said you were a straight dealer." I shook his hand twice. That night I sat at the kitchen table, the walnut table, Ruth's table, and I laid out everything. Raymond's findings. The printer log, the original trust document with the distribution clause intact, which Marcus had apparently tried to amend through a separate filing that Raymond had already flagged for challenge. The timeline that put me in Memphis when my signature appeared on a grain reserve withdrawal. Marcus had done everything right except one thing. He had assumed I was the kind of man who does not look too closely at his own operation. He had watched me grieve and decided grief made a man manageable. He thought the farm was already his, that the Nashville group was already circling, that all he needed was a signature and a nursing home brochure. He had not counted on the notebook in the tin box. He had not counted on Raymond Briggs picking up on the second ring, and he had not, I think, seriously considered that 64 years of farming teaches a man more about patience than almost anything else on earth. The family meeting, the real one, the one I called, was on a Friday morning. I asked Claire and Marcus to come out at 10. I told them I had made a decision about the property. Marcus arrived 7 minutes early. He had the folder again. He was wearing the tie again. Claire looked tired. She had looked tired for weeks. I noticed that the tiredness was a specific kind, not grief-tired, but the tired of someone carrying a secret in a body that was not built for it. They sat at the walnut table. I sat across from them. I had coffee on but did not offer any. "Before you start," Marcus said, "I just want to say that I know this is hard. The farm was everything to you and Ruth. But the practical reality." I put the drive on the table. The little silver drive Daniel had given me. Marcus stopped talking. I said, "I want to show you something." I connected the drive to the printer and pulled up the log on my tablet. Daniel had walked me through it twice on the phone the night before. The dates came up on screen. I turned the tablet around so they could see. "That is the log from the wireless printer in this kitchen," I said. "These are the dates your laptop connected to it. These are the same dates that appear on transfer documents that I did not sign." Marcus's jaw moved, but nothing came out. "Claire," I said, "I need you to look at this." She looked. She read the dates. Her face did not change at first, then something shifted in it. Something slow and terrible, like a field after a freeze when you realize the damage is deeper than the surface. "Marcus," she said. "His name, nothing else." He started talking fast. He said it was a misunderstanding. He said the transfers were authorized, that I had verbal approval, that he had been protecting me from having to deal with complicated paperwork while I was focused on Ruth. He said I was remembering wrong. He said I was confused. I let him talk. Then Raymond Briggs walked into the back door, which I had left unlocked for him. He was carrying his briefcase. Behind him was a man I had not met before. Tall, dark suit, patient face. Raymond introduced him as a representative from the county district attorney's office. He was there to observe, Raymond said, not to act. Not yet. Marcus stopped talking. The room was very quiet. Outside I could hear Decker moving in the paddock. A crow called from somewhere in the east field, twice, and then was silent. I looked at my son-in-law. I had tried, in the days before this morning, to feel something about him that was not cold. I had tried to find some ledge of sympathy to stand on, some version of the story where he was also a victim of something, where his choices made a kind of desperate sense I could recognize. I could not find it. What I found instead was a long list of Saturdays he had sat in this kitchen and looked me in the eye and lied. "Marcus," I said, "I have already spoken to the DA's office regarding the fraudulent transfers and the forged signature on the grain reserve documents. Raymond has filed a challenge to the trust amendment. The Nashville Group has been notified that the property is not and has never been listed for sale by the legal owner." He looked at the DA's representative. He looked at the DA's representative. He looked at Raymond. He looked at me. "This is not what you think," he said. "I think it is exactly what I think," I said. "I think you counted on me being too broken to look. I think you mistook grief for stupidity." Claire had not moved. She was sitting very still, her hands flat on the walnut table. "Claire," I said, and my voice came out softer than I intended. "Did you know?" She looked up. Her eyes were wet. Not the practiced cry from the funeral. Something real. "Not all of it," she said. Her voice was very small. "I knew about the Nashville Group. He said you had agreed. He said you wanted to sell. He said you were just too proud to ask for help. I believed him," she said. "I wanted to believe him because it was easier. I looked at my daughter for a long time. I thought about the earthworms. I thought about the Farmall tractor. I thought about the September afternoon with the gold light." "I know," I said. That was all I said. Marcus left with the DA's representative. Raymond stayed. I made 3 cups of coffee and set one in front of Claire, and she sat at the walnut table for a long time not drinking it, and I did not push her to talk. She helped me wash the dishes when we were done. We did not talk much. There was too much to say, and neither of us knew which end of it to pick up first. But she stayed, and I let her stay, and that was its own kind of beginning. The following weeks were not simple. Nothing about this was simple. There were meetings with attorneys, and a lot of paper, and one phone call from Marcus that I did not pick up, and one that Raymond intercepted on my behalf. The Nashville Group withdrew without incident when they understood what they were looking at. The equipment lease was renegotiated through my own bank, the one in town where I had kept my account for 30 years. The transfers were documented and submitted to the DA's office, and I was told the process would take time, which I had known before anyone told me. I'd fixed the rust patch on the Red Barn roof in the second week of October. It took most of a Saturday. I was up on the ladder longer than a man my age is supposed to be. But I moved carefully, and I took my time. And when it was done, I climbed down and stood back and looked at it the way you look at something you fixed with your own hands. Daniel came back out in November to help me upgrade the network setup. He stayed for lunch. He ate 3 helpings of the beef stew I had made that morning, which told me what I needed to know about whether he was eating enough on his own. When he was leaving, I handed him an envelope. He started to refuse, and I held up my hand. "My attorney has drawn up a small trust," I said. "Nothing dramatic." "But you helped me when you did not have to, and you did it right. Raymond helped me structure something fair." Daniel looked at the envelope. He is not a boy who shows everything on his face, same as his grandfather. But something moved in him. "Mr. Calloway," he said, "I just fixed a printer log." "I know," I said. "But you also showed up. That counts for a lot more than people tell you it does." He shook my hand and drove away in his loud truck, and I stood in the driveway until I could not hear the muffler anymore. Claire came for Sunday dinner for the first time in years, the first weekend of December. She brought a pie, apple, made from scratch. She knew I would notice if it was store-bought. She sat across from me at the walnut table, and we talked for 3 hours, and some of it was hard, and some of it was not, and we did not resolve everything, because you do not resolve 30 years of slow drift in one Sunday dinner. But she looked at me this time. She looked at me the whole time. She asked if she could come back next Sunday. "Yes," I said. "I spend a lot of evenings on the porch now. The weather is cold, and I put on the heavy canvas coat Ruth gave me, the one with the wool lining, and I sit out there until I get cold enough to go in. The fields are turned over for winter. The creek runs at a steady level. Decker stands at the paddock fence sometimes and just watches me the way horses do. like they are keeping track of something. I have been thinking about what it means to build something. Not a barn, not a business. I mean a life. You spend so long putting it together, board by board, season by season, that you stop seeing it as a whole. You just see the next thing that needs doing. And then someone tries to take it from you, and suddenly you see all of it at once. Every year, every decision, every morning you got up when you did not particularly want to. It is yours. All of it. Ruth knew that. She knew what we had built before I did. She was smarter than me in most of the ways that mattered. And modest about it, which is the smartest thing of all. I talk to her on the porch sometimes. I tell her the creek is running good. I tell her the rust patch is fixed. I tell her Claire came for dinner, that she made an apple pie, that it was close, but not quite as good as yours, and we both know it. I tell her that I am still here, that I am watching, that this land is going to stay in the hands of people who earned the right to it. And then I go inside and lock the door and make sure the tin box is where I left it. It always is. If you have ever had to fight for something you spent a lifetime building, you know that the hardest part is not the fight. The hardest part is looking the people you love in the eye when you have to choose between protecting them and protecting the truth. Sometimes those are the same thing. Sometimes they are not. I am still learning which is which. If this story found you, leave a comment and tell me where you are watching from, and if you believe that loyalty is something you show, not just something you say. Hit that like button. I will see you in the next one. I have thought a lot about the moment Marcus set that folder on my walnut table. The one I built myself. The one Ruth ate 38 years of meals at. He set it down like it already belonged to him, and I think that was the tell I should have caught sooner. That particular kind of confidence that does not come from earning something, but from deciding that the person who earned it no longer has the standing to hold it. What I have come to understand, sitting on that porch in the cold, is that what Marcus did was only possible because he read me wrong. He saw grief and translated into vacancy. He saw a man who had lost his wife and decided that man had also lost his footing. That is the calculation people make when they have never had to build anything from the ground up. They look at someone who has been hit hard and they see an opening instead of a person. The truth is that the same qualities that let him see an opening were the exact qualities that guaranteed he would not succeed. He moved fast because he had no patience. He forged signatures because he had no real access. He needed the National Group because he had no capital of his own. Every shortcut he took was a record. Every lie he told left a timestamp somewhere. He was not clever enough to understand that a man who has farmed for 30 years is a man who has learned, at a very basic level, that you cannot fake a harvest. The ground knows. I am not proud of every moment of those weeks. There were nights I sat at that table and felt something close to nothing, which is its own kind of fear. There were moments I looked at Claire and did not know what I was looking at anymore. That was the hardest thing. Not Marcus, not the forged documents, not the Nashville group. It was not knowing whether my daughter had stood in this kitchen and watched it happen. She had, partially, and she had chosen for a while to look somewhere else. I think about that a lot. I think about how we make that choice. The choice to believe the easier version of something because the true version asks too much of us. Claire wanted to believe I had agreed to sell. It was tidier. It meant she did not have to look at her husband and ask the question. I understand that. I do not excuse it, but I understand it the way you understand weather. Not as something with intention, but as something with consequence. What pulled her back was the same thing that pulled me through. She was raised to look directly at things. Ruth raised her that way. I like to think I contributed something to that too. At some point, the thing you were raised to be becomes stronger than the thing fear is asking you to be. That is not a guarantee. It is just what happened with Claire. Daniel showed up with a laptop bag held together with duct tape and did the right thing. Because his grandfather was a straight dealer, and that is what he knew how to be. Raymond picked up on the second ring because that is who Raymond is. Nobody in the story was heroic. They were just steady and steady over time. is the only thing that actually holds. I fixed the rust patch on the red barn roof in October. It took most of a Saturday. It was not a dramatic act. Nobody saw it except Decker, and he did not seem particularly impressed. But I climbed down that ladder and looked at what I had fixed, and I felt something settle back into place that had been knocked loose for a long time. That is what I want to leave you with. Not a lesson, exactly. Just this. The things you build with your hands and your years do not stop being yours because someone decided they should be. And the people who try to take them from you are almost always counting on you to believe, even briefly, that they might be right. Do not give them that, not even for a minute.